And we are live. Welcome to the Aaron Warner podcast, the quarterly book club, where I've got Kyle Clutie and hopefully soon Brianna. I know she was stuck in clinic. And I love the fact that what we do is real. Right, Kyle? Because it's just, we plan on these. We've got a set time. We schedule around it, and then life happens. And I think that's a good
Yep,
lead into the book we're going to discuss.
that's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was telling Kyle ahead of time that I usually listen to the audiobooks. I think we've talked about this before. And I buy the paperback book or the hardcover so I can listen and read. And I've got a whole bookshelf full of books. And I said, well, I'm going to just try to listen to this one and see how it works. And of all the books to listen to and not have in hand, this is probably the wrong one because there were so many good one-liners and direct quotes that I wanted to write down. So I jotted notes down as I went, but it's not the same as having there to reference. So Kyle, I'm going to lean heavily on you for the exact one-liners.
Sounds good. Yeah, we are reviewing. We read, the three of us, Same as Ever by Morgan Housel. Many of you, if you like to read about like finance and money, he also wrote a book, a New York Times bestseller, I think a couple of years ago, The Psychology of Money, which was super popular and also equally awesome. But Aaron, hey Brianna, how's it going? Aaron, I've got what we need here. I've got my note cards, and just to prove your point in terms of one-liners, I usually can fit all my notes into like one or two, but I have several note cards here that I'm
Oh,
showing
wow.
you of all the quotes that I wrote down, all the
For same as
one-liners
ever?
here that I gotta
Yeah.
store away for later reference.
This was a good one. I listened to this one, well, read it, listened to it twice. I'm on my halfway through my third time through, and it was eye opening and a lot of self reflection. I'm not sure that I fully enjoyed, but I'm glad I was by myself on a runs for some of those. So
Yeah,
awesome.
it wasn't your it's an interesting choice, I think, and that's why I was a little hesitant when I recommended it. It's that it's not your typical like, hey, we're business owners and we're looking for some sort of productivity slash business strategy slash whatever it is, right? HR. This was more, the subtitle is a guide to what never changes, and I think and so I don't even know how to classify this book, but I think he said in page 4, like just to tee it up, like the point of the book, he says, page 4, that's what this book is about. In 1,000 parallel universes, what would be true in every single one? So in a world that's changing constantly around us, like what are the things that don't change? That's why the book is called Same as Ever. So I'm interested to have this conversation. I'm interested to hear what you both have to say and what kind of jumped out at you, both personally and in your practice, because I do think there's a lot of little nuggets here that help in both spheres.
Well, I will say the first thing that struck me was I heard my dad's voice through the entire book telling me, right, like, yep, that's what we did when we were kids. Yep, that's how it was when we were kids. Like, yeah, you guys aren't coming up with anything new. It's all just the same. And then as a parent now, especially with fashion, I wished I would have saved all my clothes from high school because it's exactly what my kids are wearing. And it's
So true.
much to their dismay. Shoot, even their music is listening to stuff that I grew up on. That's a whole different discussion about how bad music is now. But yeah, I kept hearing his voice saying, yeah, it's all the same. It just kind of circles back.
Yeah, I love how he kind of started the book off about the 1950s and how really comparison is the robber of all happiness. And you're never really even comparing side by side. And I think as obviously we're online more than ever, it's easy to compare yourself and look at that the grass is greener and you really don't know. And we're not asking the right questions. But the 1950s was interesting on how you had the cookie cutter home, the father was typically working, you had 3 kids, and they were happy, like really, really genuinely happy because they didn't have anybody else to compare themselves to. And that's kind of how he kicked off the book. So that's probably Aaron, like back, my dad was born in 55, right? So he grew up in that genre. of that time period. But I love the history part of it. I wasn't expecting it to go into so much history, and that's what really intrigued me about the book.
Yeah. I love that part as well, especially we might be jumping ahead, but when he talked about the Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech, right? It's we see things as they are, but knowing the backstory and knowing how they got there is really interesting.
Yeah.
And I felt a lot of the book. I typically like data. Right? I like to look at the numbers. I like to look at the spreadsheets, which was part of the gut punch, because there was a lot of talking about how the spreadsheets and the numbers don't tell the full story. Right? This. I think there was a line in there that said the best story usually wins, and
Yes.
and how they referenced the Vietnam War, where on paper it looked like everything was going great, but hearts and minds weren't won, and when you looked at the emotional side of what was happening and the people that were involved, it wasn't winning, and we all know how it ended up. So that was interesting for me. A lot of self-reflection on making sure that the numbers are important, but having that pulse on or the temperature of the emotional part and the story part.
The number
Yeah,
side
I
to
think.
it too. Okay.
No, go ahead.
The number side to it too was where he said we're really, really bad at small numbers, and we're really, really bad at really big numbers, and because you can't really see it. But when he broke the miracles part down, where he's like, miracles happen every day because you do like literally a million things a month, I think he said. So it's like when a miracle is 1 in a million, like everybody has a miracle a month. Do you guys remember that part?
Yep.
I was like, oh.
Yeah. That's where it's the mind exploding emoji. So many times like that's what happened when I was reading that. Like, oh wow, that he's right. Yeah. The other quote that came to mind too, pertaining to that, Aaron, was I've got it written down here. It's the one from Bezos, Jeff Bezos. He quotes him saying, and I think this is in the chapter where he's talking about how sometimes the anecdotal evidence, sometimes I think that's kind of pertains to the story, is actually more true than what than all the data actually says. And he quotes Jeff Bezos. He says, Jeff Bezos says, "The thing I have noticed is when the anecdotes and data disagree, the anecdotes are usually right. There's usually something wrong with the way you are measuring it." So again, I think we see this kind of the same thing too. Like when you're seeing, when you're looking at your practice information, when you start to see these little signals, I guess, whether it's certain patient complaints or it's something in your process that's popping up that you can't really see when you're looking at your monthly KPIs or whatever. Even though your numbers look great, but these signals keep arising, these anecdotes, that's where you have to be mindful of approaching those things and being okay, like accepting that something could be wrong. Yep. And addressing those anecdotes. So I thought that was an excellent way of saying that.
Absolutely. In fact, that earlier this year, it made me think of, and bringing it back to the practice, beginning of summer-ish, I started getting those tingles in the back of your neck saying something's not right. Specifically for us, it was in the optical. It took me about another 5 weeks going back and looking and realizing that, I was looking too narrow. Once I backed away, I saw it, but our mid-tier capture rate was dropping. So we were doing a really good job in the office selling Premier product or selling the Save the Sale when a patient wanted to leave, but we were missing that mid-tier, and it was a very slow trickle down in our capture rate, which is never a straight line, so I wasn't picking up the nuances. But it was interesting reading this and pondering that, knowing that my spidey senses told me something was off before the data really showed me something was off. And had I picked up on that or listened to it sooner, because I looked at the data and said, well, everything looks fine. We're just going through an ebb and a flow, when really we were ebbing our way downwards as opposed to ebbing our way upwards like we want to go.
There was that quote too where it talks, I think I love how we bring this back to our profession, right? Because we really truly want everybody to be successful because we're all in this together. It said, bet on yourself. If you gamble on something and it doesn't work, are you going to have to shut down? No. Like, I brought that kind of back to practice.
Yeah.
So we have to, he talked a lot about doctors too. So in medical school, right, there's certainty around treating a patient. You have to have some level of certainty. On the business side is where all the uncertainty comes. But that's, again, where you do bet on yourself. You're not going to have to shut down. You're going to just have to pivot. And the other quote that he said after that was, people who are at the top are determined, optimistic, don't take no for an answer, are relentlessly confident in their own abilities. That's what we're not really taught, or that we confide in others enough, which is great about what we're doing here. Because we really are a sure thing.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
For sure.
And not only are we a sure thing, but I think where we err, or at least I struggle with, and I think this is an optometric trait, is we want to be a sure thing right now all the time, not I want to be a sure thing at the end, right? And telling ourselves, hey, like, I'm not sure the answer right now, but I'm confident in myself enough to know we're going to figure this out and we're going to make it right. And I think that's where I struggled still do, but certainly out of school, a whole lot, being able to tell a patient, hey, I'm not sure, but we're going to figure it out. Because I didn't want to say that I'm not sure part. I wanted to always be sure. I wanted to always know right away. When I took over business and bought it off of Dad, I never wanted to make a mistake. I always wanted to have the right answer at the right time. As opposed to saying, hey, I'm confident enough in me and my team that, we may have a couple of missteps, but we're going to figure it out and we're going to end up being all right.
So that was the quote. Logic is invented by man, and trying to turn it into a math problem is hard.
But we're going to figure it out. We're going to get that math problem.
The other quote there, I think it's the same chapter. He quotes Robert Greene, which I think he has another. There's another quote by Robert Greene in the book that's great. But this one is, he says, the need for certainty is the greatest disease the mind faces. And I think that's pertaining to what you're saying, is like, so yeah, I'll say it again. The need for certainty is the greatest disease the mind faces. And you can apply that to so many aspects of our lives, just personally and professionally. And I think the mind, in my, I guess, experience, the better I am at handling uncertainty, like addressing how much, like, hey, just realizing that, like, life is uncertain. And really every decision I make is just based upon a degree of certainty. And even in the clinic, like, no treatment is 100% certain, right? Yes, a -3 lens. About the most certain thing we can do is obviously, fitting a pair of glasses for patients. But even that's not 100%, certain. But everything we prescribe therapeutically, there's a degree of certainty there. And what I think helps you be a good clinician is realizing, like, the scales or the degrees of certainty that each therapy that you're prescribing has, and then being able to communicate that degree of certainty in a way that's, like, well received by the patient, so they understand, like, hey, this isn't gonna, this isn't a 100% chance that it's gonna treat or cure you or manage this condition, but I feel confident enough. That's what you're talking about, Aaron. We're trained well enough, we're positioned well enough to know, like, that we should have the confidence and experience to make the decision despite the uncertainty. And I think that's where, like, tons of experience has to take you to that position where you're comfortable in those situations.
Yeah, and that brings it to what he said about the heart. I think, too, like, a lot of our times we're in our head. But it's also that feeling, like you were talking about your spidey senses. He said, too, the heart is what you're capable of within the context of what your brain will endure in risk and reward. And it will not let you die. So that was like the marathon runner when he was talking about that, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
In your brain, your brain will quit way before your body will quit.
Oh, yeah.
So the endurance part of this for what we're doing, right, is he talked a lot about longevity. and like the 10-year cycles and the ebb and flows of the economy and everything else. That's where it brought back to same as ever. Was
Yeah.
again, I see patience. I don't have patience,
I'm writing that down.
but we have to have more patience to
Yeah.
to let things ride and not like go on these roller coasters. I think that was like the main takeaway from the book is it's just an even like one step in front of the other,
Wow.
knowing you're on the path with passion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't he say like essentially the world falls apart on average every 10 years? Or essentially the
Yes, he
economy,
did.
or,
Yeah.
He
you know,
did.
pretty much, on average, every 10 years, it's all going to fall apart. And you just have to be ready for that, prepared, and understand that it's going to happen, and you'll make it. It's like,
Okay,
oh,
so
okay.
we're like in a good cycle right now. We have till 2030 because
Yeah.
2000 fell apart. That's when I graduated high school. 2010 was when I graduated optometry school.
Oh,
2020
wow.
was when I
Yeah.
bought a practice.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're milestones, tough
And
years.
I
Wow.
still live to talk about it
Yeah, you do.
Yep.
with a cocktail next to me.
As you
Right.
should be. That's yes. That's called an expert right there. Right. Yeah, you've realized certain things along the way. You know, it's funny. I just thought of this now, and it was a quote that I had written down, but I didn't apply it how I'm thinking now. But I think he said, people don't want accuracy; they want certainty.
Yep.
And I looked at it as projective and patience, right? They don't want that perfect number. They just want to know that I'm taking care of things they're in my hands and in good hands with me and my team. But I didn't self-reflect that we want that too, right? We want certainty, and sometimes I think I chase that certainty in the accuracy, or I try to be too precise or too predictive of what's going to happen, and instead of looking for hey, I know what to expect. I know what to expect the unexpected, and I'm trying to control it with that math problem that you referenced earlier that doesn't exist. I'm trying to solve for something that I can't control.
Yeah.
I've got a good quote here, page 35. This is one where I remember reading this out on my deck on a Sunday afternoon and just thinking, wow, that is, I need to apply that right now. So I'll read it here. It's put as much effort into managing expectations as in changing circumstances. So put as much effort into managing expectations as in, or even more than changing your circumstances. Essentially, I think the chapter was talking about how much we have way more control over our expectations than we do our circumstances oftentimes. And our expectations are what really primarily drive our like perceptions of happiness, our perceptions of how well we're doing, our perceptions of like how far we've gone, right? I was thinking in the framework of my practice, in terms of my expectations. Sometimes we all want to grow, and we're growing, but your expectations are, I don't know about you both, but mine are like so over the top sometimes. For my practice, our Omaha location is about 5 years old now, and we're doing great, we're growing, but sometimes you just think like, man, I want it to go faster. I don't have the patience. I want it to keep going. But then you realize, you kind of step back and you look at, okay, who am I comparing myself to, right? Or go back to what we talked about last time, in terms of the gap and the gain too. You can think about kind of applying some of the same mindset. But I thought that quote was super helpful for me.
I like that, and that goes along with what was the gentleman who lived to be 99, Morgan Housel, right? He said the first rule of happiness is low expectations.
It's so true though.
Yeah.
And I think like what we do as high achievers, high motivators, right, is we keep moving the goalpost. And that's what
Yeah.
I've been doing really over the last year, just through the books that we're reading, through communities that are coming together, is doing that work, like understanding what happiness means to you, not comparing it, because he said too, like social media is just a performance.
I hate it.
And other thing too with COVID, if we look back on it and reflect back on it, he's like, it'll just be a blip in the history books, right? Just like every other thing, you know, between the 1920s and the 1930s, and then he went through all the decades. But he said stress focuses your attention where it needs to be focused. It kills procrastination, and it takes what you need to get done to do it right now. And that's, if we look back on those 2 months that we got to close down and get laser focused.
Yeah.
We all
For
came
sure.
out so far ahead, and I'm seeing like that our practices grew really over those last 3 years, and now we're kind of like we've teetered out a little bit. So I think it's time. Obviously, there's resting periods and recovery periods, and that was a tough time for everybody. But I think we're kind of in that recovery still, and now it's time to kind of get out of that and get focused again.
It's
Yeah, what did he say? He said like keep running. What was that? I forget what chapter that was, but towards the end, basically just like the mindset of like you have to keep going.
Yeah.
You know, just keep running, keep moving forward, keep progressing, because there's never like this arrival that occurs, right? Because the second you do, that's when companies like he gave I love the I forget where it was, but he talked about Jerry Seinfeld, and he talked about how Seinfeld, when he was asked like why he quit when he did because he was at the top, Seinfeld responded with something like, "I didn't want to know what it felt like on the way down." Down from the top. And I thought that was really, obviously that's a great Seinfeld quote because he's always super witty and profound like that. But you realize everything has peaks, ebbs and flows. And so you have to realize like all the companies that have been, he listed off tons of companies like Motorola, Staples, Best Buy, they all had these big peaks. But they all eventually they stopped innovating, and they kind of rested on their laurels. And eventually, somebody else who was running harder and faster, or who was running, kept running, overtook them. So it's a good reminder just in our practices, like just to keep going, right? And it's probably best and wisest to continue to push the lever in terms of growth. Right.
Absolutely. In fact, Mariana, who's awesome and in the background making sure all this runs well. Before we went live, we were just talking about the pink Motorola Razr, and talking all through technologies. And I didn't have the pink one; I did have a silver one, but I remember standing in line to get that because you had to have it. And if you didn't have it, I don't know what bad thing would happen to us, but I didn't want to find out. And I don't think this quote was in this book, but it talks about it. It made me think about it frequently, that hard times create strong men, and strong men create good times, and good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And I to your point, Brianna, the 2020, I mean, we buckled down, we tightened up, we got creative, we got inventive, and we prospered from it. And I think I can feel it in myself, just personal life and in the practice and whatnot, that it's easy to step back and go, we made it, and sit. And then I felt it. I talked to the story a little bit this year when I saw our capture rate going down, just not being as vigilant, not being on top of, not being as creative and inventive and whatnot, that it's hard to enjoy that good time, but not relax in that good time.
Yeah, there was the chapter where he said the wonders of the future, and he said it always feels like we're falling behind. So I think that's just human nature, especially now more than ever because it's in your face. But when he said that there's a path to how we respond to new tech that's world changing. So if we're talking just about the Razr, right? So it goes from, and we can all put ourselves in these buckets with new technology and new advancements in medicine, is I've never heard of it. I've heard of it, but I don't understand it. I understand it, but I don't see how it's useful. I see how it could be useful. I see how it could be fun for rich people, but not for me. I use it, but it's just a toy. It is becoming more useful. I use it all the time I couldn't imagine life without this. So if we look at our profession, We could all go in one of
Yeah.
those buckets.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
we
yeah.
all
For
wait
sure.
till like the end. I'd love us all to just like see where you are, move up one on that rung,
Yeah.
and we would be unstoppable.
Well, I will admit in our little confessional that when it comes to AI, I'm
Are
earlier
you
in
there?
that. No, I'm not. I'm waiting on the really smart people, the Haley Perrys
Yeah.
and the Chris Wolfs and Kyle. I hope you're going to jump in here because
Yeah.
I'm going to grab onto your coattails. But I can see where it's useful, but I
Yep.
get overwhelmed. My anxiety goes up, and I'm
Yeah.
not someone that. I mean, I think I can tackle anything. The house next door catches on fire. I'm grabbing a fire extinguisher and running over there. I don't get anxious. You start talking to me
Yeah.
about AI, and I get sweaty.
Yeah, AI, that's a really good example of that. Yeah, what other, I was just trying to think of other pieces of equipment or other tests or, diagnostic tests that we run or pieces of software or whatever it is. We have in our profession, we have the early adopters, the people that, they just see something new and they're just grabbing onto it. I don't define myself as an early adopter at all. I'm usually waiting for the early adopters to figure out the kinks and the bugs, and I'm usually
You're welcome, Kyle.
the next in line. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And but that's
Thank you for
where,
that,
honestly,
by
that's
the
where I
way.
sit as well I sit that way with AI too, though, Aaron. I don't feel like, I use it here and there and I get it. I understand the value of it, but I'm still kind of like that. It is a little bit overwhelming trying to figure out like, how do I master this? What exactly do I use it for? So, yeah.
Yeah.
So part of the AI conversation, I think we can kind of talk about this for just a second because I think there is a lot of anxiety around it. We use it we use it every day, not even knowing that it is. The thing that people are, if a company has to tell you that there's AI in their product, that's the wrong category, I think, to put it. But the
Yep.
whole thing about technology, right, building Dr. Contact Lens, it's just about the use case. So it's all about the user story. So what started Dr. Contact Lens, right, was I want, as a doctor, to be able to send my patients a digital copy of their prescription and allow them to order. That was it. It's one sentence. That's what everything's built on. If you look at Amazon, I want people to be able to ship books and not have to go to a bookstore. That was Amazon. So if you look at every huge tech company, I want, Microsoft, I want everybody to have this, be able to do this on a computer. It's just the user story. So if you back it down, that's the simplicity behind it. Then all the technical stuff comes around it. So it's the jargon that we get nervous about. It's the uncertainty. We all want certainty, right? And that comes, but it's just the user story. Is that
Wow.
helpful?
Yeah. Well, you just
That's good.
summarized
I like
Simon Sinek's Start with Why much
Yeah.
better than than I learned from
Yeah.
him.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's looking at our EMR systems, right?
Right.
Can I ask 10 questions that would allow me to understand if this patient's going to progress with their diabetes? I can ask the same 10 questions. So that's where we have to, this would be fun to do more groups around and starting to think this way because we're all part of this build. 75% of generative AI companies are coming into healthcare. So if that does not tell you healthcare is broken, I don't know what will.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not that it's going to replace us. It's going to make things more efficient, more effective, and easier. But I loved how he said in the book with doctors, we go to school to learn it, but our qualities that we're not taught is how to explain it to the patient. So the most doctors are the ones that sit back, that can take all of this and connect.
Yep.
AI can't do that.
No.
Right? So it's gathering data that we don't have to be data collectors anymore, and can get back to a human component.
So it would allow us to be the artist that we want to be, not the
Yeah.
right, the
Yeah.
science and the art as opposed to the. That would be
Yeah.
very cool, and is going to be very cool. And I think that the other thing I'm hearing from you, and I'm thinking, and I pulled from reading, and I started another book as well called The Anxious Generation, which if you have
Great
children, you
read.
must read
Good
that
book.
book. Yes.
It's a must read.
And then I stole the idea of short quotes from John Acuff, but bruises, not scars. And
Yeah.
I think that we were taught you can't make a mistake because you could hurt somebody. And you don't want to hurt somebody, and so we become very risk adverse. And but our nature is that certainty, not accuracy, we just talked about, and being able to say it's okay to try. Right? It's okay to get a bruise because bruises heal. We don't want scars, but bruises are something we should almost look forward to because we learn from that, and either it becomes a positive, successful outcome or it becomes a positive learning experience. And either way, you heal, but you're better off on the back end.
I do actually recommend that book to all my patients now in my myopia control clinic.
Oh, do you? It's a great book.
Generation.
It's a good idea.
Really good book.
So, yeah, could be our next.
Yeah, it reminds me to pull another quote from the book, or let's see here. He has a bunch of questions at the end too, but I'll start with the question. He says, ask yourself this question: what hassle am I trying to eliminate that's actually an unavoidable cost of success? I thought that was a great question. I feel like I need to ask that to myself every single day, because I feel like really most of my energy is, okay, what hassle am I trying to eliminate today? How am I, what do I need to do in order to make, the day a little bit more comfortable and cleaner and less chaotic and those things. So, what is unavoidable really? And he quoted a friend, and I think you probably all got a chuckle out of this quote, but he says, running a company is like eating glass while being punched in the face.
Yes, that one got me.
Sounds about right.
So running a practice is like eating glass while being punched in the face, but it's worth it. Obviously, it has to be worth it.
See, on that too.
Otherwise
he
we wouldn't be
said, I
doing
think it comes back to purpose, right? And I think all of
Yeah.
us on this call have found it. We help others find theirs too, because I think it goes. You're
Yeah.
going to go ebb and flows. But he goes, everybody's a walking anxiety disorder harnessed for productivity. And he said the most talented people are tortured. The fear, the pain, the struggle are motivators that positively feelings can never match. Be careful
Yeah.
what you wish for. Only a carefree life sounds wonderful until the motivation and progress it prevents. And that's when he went into like Sears and all the things that went down. So the most potent fuel of problem solving is the seed of opportunity. And it's at the root of what we enjoy today that continues to go.
Good stuff.
That was good. I really liked too when he talked about drawing a blank on the scientist's name, Albert Einstein. Quote, when he said that when he had a mental block, he'd lay down and just stare up at the ceiling, or he would go for a walk, which is the opposite of what I do. Right? When I'm at a block and hit something, I double down and try to work harder. And maybe it's the black coffee that's driving me, and that anxious and burning in your pit of your stomach, or trying to drive the stress-induced, up against the timeline. But it never dawned on me to stop and pull yourself away from that situation to see what comes with you.
Yeah. He did say this, I can say it because I'm a girl, but he said it's like hustle porn, always looking busy. How much time do you have to kill?
Yeah.
So we do have
Yep.
that. It's just that always constant go, 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 go.
It's interesting you bring that up. I'm working hard to eliminate the word busy from the office.
Yeah.
Because I'll call them and say, how's it going? And they're like, it's busy. Busy means nothing.
I like that.
It means absolutely nothing. Are you being productive? And what I finally told them, and I said, look, I'm still searching for the perfect patient, which is they come in once a year and spend $1 million. I'll run a whole office off that, right? The next best patient is the two people that come in once a year and spend 500,000 each. So like being busy, that's almost a negative, right? I don't want to be busy. I want to be efficient. If you can get 10 hours worth of work done in 2 hours, you're a more efficient employee, you're a more productive employee. So let's find something different other than busy. I want you to get everything done. Speaking out of both sides of my mouth because I'm a hypocrite on this because I don't stop working. But right, I want you to get everything done in 3 hours. Then you've got 5 hours left of your workday just to enjoy. So if anybody figures out how to get rid of that word and change that mentality.
That brings me to our profession on like what are we looking at? The thing that comes up in my world a lot is like the rebates and savings. Right? So we're so worried about rebates and savings over what's actually in the practice. So the more precise, he said, the more precise you are, the less time you have to focus on the big picture. So the more precise you are, the less time you have to focus on the big picture. That's where we do. We look at all the pennies, not all the dollars. So I think that brings back to that busy statement is efficiencies and actually, yes, getting into the weeds, but also having that vision with the words that we use.
Yeah. That quote's interesting.
Yeah, I think there's like...
I was going to say we had...
I was just... Yeah, go ahead.
My kid ordered something on Amazon. It didn't work, so we asked for the refund, and they said, well, you just keep it. And she looked at me and said, why on earth would they allow me to keep it as opposed to sending it back? Because she's seeing the monetary dollar. And I sat down with her and said, well, it costs them more money to pay for the shipping back, to restock it, to deal with it. It's just easier to say, let it go. Right? They've got that much margin to build it into the waste. And it blew her mind. And I'm laughing now because it was easy for me to explain it, but at the office, it's hard for me to do it there. Because I want to look at the details. I want to look at the pennies. I want to look at make sure that everything's been done properly.
Yeah. And he said you don't pay the price with cash. Most things worth pursuing charge their fee with stress. This was, what chapter was this? This was...
Guilty.
It's supposed to be hard, but not minding... The chapter is it's supposed to be hard, but not minding that it hurts. So he said, most things worth pursuing charge their fee with stress, quirky people, uncertainty, other incentives, nonsense, long hours, constant doubt that is overhead cost of getting ahead. And this is the price of getting ahead. So it's most likely is worth paying, and it's a price that must be paid. And there are few coupons, and sales are rare. So it said it's all about taking the bullshit.
I feel seen with that quote.
Yep. Yeah. It's like, but it's the healthy, another part of the book he talks about, I'm just thinking of this, we're talking about this, the hassle part of it. There is on one side of the spectrum, right? And then the other side of the spectrum, there's when he talked about how tiny changes, it's kind of like an Atomic Habits, James Clear type mindset thing where tiny habits or tiny changes can compound over many years to create, whether it's big, good things or big bad things, right? And so I kind of see that on the opposite ends of the spectrum, and it's almost like there's the wise way or the way of wisdom that he's trying to thread the needle in is the tension, like managing basically both sides together at the same time, right? So it's almost like there's just like a place where you have to find there's healthy tension, and you gotta almost have both. The example that I think about in my practice all the time is the healthy tension that just really bothers me some days, but the tension between running the practice, working on it and growing it, and being in the practicing patients, right? And I think there has to be a tension there. The other tension I feel too is just as I get to speak and lecture across the country at other, other locations and other events, there's a tension between like, I really enjoy doing that and producing those lectures. But the more I do of that, the more I realize that I take the foot off the gas at my practice in terms of pushing people, holding people accountable. So, but I know I need like all of it in terms of, because they all support each other, right? The patient care supports my ability to teach other, colleagues. The patient part of it also allows me to understand what's really going on in my patient's life and in my practice's life, because I get to live in the processes, and then I get to see, what needs to improve or change. But then I also need the time of being the generalist and seeing everything from above. So, that would be the hassle that I continue to try to eliminate, is like that tension, I would say, if I were really specific about it. But that's kind of the thing that I thought about when I asked that question of what hassle am I trying to eliminate? I think it's the hassle of like that tension between it all, but I know that it's like, if I got rid of that tension, then I probably wouldn't have any of it. So it's just interesting to kind of reflect on that. I don't know if either of you feel the same tension.
For sure, that same tension is there, and I think that's what makes this group specifically special, is we all are still practicing. We all have our side gig that's kind of becoming our main gig, and then we still love this industry to its core with the passion behind it for patients and our colleagues. I think, too, it brings us to it, like why this all started was buy back your time. So people constantly will ask me, well, how do you do it all? The answer is I don't do it all. I have a great team, and I have functions behind that. And yeah, shit slips through the cracks. That's okay, right? But I think it's putting those little checks and balances in place. There was, I can't remember if it was in or what we read, but like Oprah works 2 hours a day, and then spends, like Warren Buffett, same thing. He's reading, he like does those schedule blocks. So I've gotten really good, Kyle, at the practice of like really condensing patient care so I can do all those other things, because we can't mentally switch. We are really bad at it. Yep. So that's, I think, where some of us can learn where, okay, instead of spreading it out over 5 days or 6 days, can you condense that to 3.5? Yeah. But that day and a half is for you to work on their practice.
Yep. The hardest part for me on the two hardest parts, and I agree that it's made a big difference starting from that book and engaging more with you guys and continue to read. One was being okay with somebody else taking care of my baby, whatever that baby is, right? And but once they take care of it, it's amazing, right? It's kind of like it's a new parent the first time that you leave your kid at home with the babysitter and you go out and you have date night. It's scary until you get out and then you say, we should do this more often, right? Because it works great. And then you come home and baby's happier than when you left, because babysitter's always more fun than mom and dad. But the first one was having somebody take care of the baby. But two is getting over the fear of what I lost when I stepped out of one world to go to the other. And learning to say that's okay, I can't do everything, and I have to say no to opportunities to say yes to others. So that fear in that saying no was really challenging.
Well, I think you're getting to the heart of what that quote, the need for certainty is the greatest disease the mind faces, right? Like, if we're really honest with ourselves, what does it take to jump into delegation? Delegation is uncertain territory, because you don't know if somebody else, you've done everything yourself before, right? Because there's a ton of certainty there that's really, really comfortable.
Yeah.
Right? It's really comfortable because I know exactly how to do this, and I've done this a million times. So I'm just going to do this by myself, right? That's the realm of certainty, versus delegating to somebody else. That's probably the stress or the anxiety that controls us there. It's based upon that feeling of uncertainty.
Yeah, we have to coach ourselves at a job.
Yes. Moving from having a job to owning a career is tough, right? They're owning a business. Yeah. I mean,
I did find that quote, and I put like a smile emoji next to it, where like it's like eating glass and being punched in the nose. Oh,
yeah.
So true. He did say, though, in what was this chapter? The chapter was called "Keep Running." He said, no one is extinction proof. No one can ever rest. And I put in parentheses, I'm tired. And he said, get over it.
Yeah.
And evolution is ruthless and unforgiving. It doesn't teach by showing you what works, but by destroying what doesn't.
Ooh.
So again, that same as ever, right, concept is, it's, we already know the future because we've lived the past.
Yep.
But we never look to the past. So back to storytelling, he said about comedians, he's like, you can have the most brilliant mind, brilliant professor, have 6 people show up for his lecture. A comedian can take the same thing, make a show out of it, make it super fun and memorable, and away you go. I mean, that's what we do with patient care every day. That's what we do with our staff every day. And that's, again, what we do here.
Yeah, I like that. I love the extinction one. I will say that part of what scared me and that I got over was, at the office, I'm important, all my team's important, and if we lose somebody, they're a key player, and oh my goodness, the sky's going to fall. And to the point where we said everybody's expendable, right? And while I'm still in patient care, I'm not nearly as much. And should all my other stuff fall apart, if should Vision Source one day say, hey, Aaron, we're not interested, thank you, and goodbye, and whatnot. Quite frankly, I don't have a full-time schedule to go back to because I've backfilled those roles in the office.
High five!
Yeah, but I've extinguished myself, right? Which is freeing. It's scary at first because my kid grew up, right? Doesn't need me anymore. But
Yeah.
it's still advice. College kids still come home and you got to do laundry somewhere and you raid my pantry. But it's interesting and freeing to know that I don't have to be there. It's okay. It's gonna be fine. It's going to be productive. It's going to do really well. And quite frankly, it's doing better than if I was still there pulling all the strings and micromanaging. But extinction is a cool place to be. Sometimes. I don't want to extinct. I don't want to go extinct yet here, but. Yeah.
There was the other chapter was the power of incentives, and I think that comes to both managing our teams, managing ourselves, managing reps, managing circumstances. He said, I can't remember who he said wrote the book, but it was 3 ways to being a professional writer. So you lie to people who want to be lied to, and you will be rich. Tell the truth to people who want the truth, and you will make a living. Tell the truth to people who want to be lied to, and you will go broke.
It kind of summarizes our media right now, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit. But it said people follow incentives, not advice. People don't follow logic. And he said, Benjamin Franklin, a quote from him, he said, if you were to persuade, appeal to interest, not to reason.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that goes for incentives for our teams, incentives that we put on ourselves in managing the business.
Yep.
And
That falls
then
in the
ask
whole
yourself,
purpose thing, right?
Yeah. Which of my current views would change if my incentives were different?
Ooh.
So it's hard to change that incentive, and that was the medical school quote was in there. Medical school doesn't teach you the difference between medicine. Medicine's a biological science. A doctor is a social skill, managing expectations. And that brought me to like managing insurance, managing the disease, managing the patient, and everything that goes along with that.
I find that question really helpful when I think about the things that I offer to my patients. Like if thermal pulsation, IPL, and every myopia management treatment gave me no income, right? If I didn't get any sort of out-of-pocket,
I'm not feeling comfortable where you're going with this right now, Kyle.
would I still recommend, right? Would I still recommend it? Would I still be as aggressive as I am with IPL for my inflammatory telangiectasia patients with MGD? Would I still be as aggressive with, you know what I mean? So I think it's just a super helpful question, and you realize like, what do you really believe about those things? And
Mm-hmm.
you know my high horse a little bit on this, Aaron,
Oh
about
yeah.
just our profession and like
Yep.
doctors making recommendations to their patients and teaching other colleagues in a way that is trying to really, we need to, my view is just like we all need to be not just aware of the incentive structure, but we need to like be full disclosure of the incentives and more than just a disclosure slide, and I think that would be helpful. And not that we're trying to like expose anybody or anything like that, but I just want to know so I can make the best decision about a product, right? And I think it's helpful for everybody to understand those things. But yeah, that's just like would I really prescribe this? I think I would still prescribe those things just as much as I do. But I think it's helpful for you as a clinician to kind of think about those things as like, how much is this really affecting me? How much is this new piece of equipment, because of its awesome reimbursement rate through Blue Cross Blue Shield, it's the highest ever. How much is that incentivizing or persuading my view of how well this is working for X, therapy or X disease?
Yep.
We have a lot of those in our profession, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's hard to be completely altruistic because you need to have those relationships and you need to be able to work
sure.
with the right products. In fact, Chris and I have long talks on, the few sponsors that we will have as sponsors to his podcast and my podcast, the whole show, because it's not about taking a sponsorship opportunity. It's about making sure that the people that we engage with, the companies that we engage with, we believe in. And the minute that changes, the relationship's over. And
sure.
and so there's a lot of conversations behind the scenes saying, is challenging. Is this still the right opportunity? Is this still the right relationship? Is this still something that it's not going to influence anything we're doing because we already believed in it, we're already engaging with it, and this just comes along secondarily. And I think that's important for any of us, not just in the practice, but as we talk to colleagues. I've turned down a number of speaking opportunities because it was for a company that I didn't feel comfortable speaking with, and for one reason or another. And I sleep better at night, and I know, Kyle, you and Brianna, both are the same because we've talked about it. But I think that's important to be aware of.
Well, it's said in the book too. We all know that quote. It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to destroy it.
Oof.
So that, and unhappy people scale faster than anything. So again, I think we go back to incentives a lot, where the incentives, they do matter, but really ask yourself that question: is, if this incentive went away, would my view change? I think you might surprise yourself and scare yourself on a lot of things that you do. And I love how you practice, Kyle, because that's the same way that I practice. Is, would I do this on my mom? Would I recommend this to my grandma? And is this the right way? So
Yep. One of the
Well, you
things
can even apply that. You can apply that to our political moment as well. Not we won't get into like the specifics of politics.
Yeah.
And probably not a great time at minute 53 for that, but but you just look at incentives in terms of like, your own beliefs too, right? Incentives don't have to be monetarily. They can be just your own beliefs about the world and your own personal world on things. If your worldview was different, would you, still have the same views? Would you, the incentives on believing a particular candidate or believing a particular policy platform were different for you personally, would you still hold that view on that? So, it's just such a great question to ask yourself for so many aspects of life.
Oh, absolutely.
And he said that too. He said, the more people are exposed to different viewpoints, the more angry people get.
Well, because I think you have to, then you recognize that you might be wrong, and that's a tough place to be.
It's a really hard place to be.
It's a really hard place to be. I will share, and then I've got a listener typed in something that was really good, so I'll read that in a minute. But at the very end of the book, he talks about the different perspectives, right, and understanding what others have lived through. And I think I've mentioned it before. My wife and I are very different politically. We come from very different backgrounds. Our professions are very different. Right? I'm entrepreneurial. She's a public school teacher, and frequently we'll get asked by friends, "How are you guys, together? How do you have this relationship? How do you talk to each other?" And what's interesting is understanding the other side and listening has opened so many doors, has opened so many minds, has opened so much opportunities. And I'm kind of jealous of my kids because they get to grow up seeing all sorts of different ideas and philosophies and being able to pick and choose what they feel is best from all of those. But it's really interesting just asking somebody when I've gotten into a debate over whatever, hey, help me understand where you're coming from. And then I'll share where I'm coming from, because that has lowered so many walls. I'm not going to convince you. Just if you've got a different background, if you came from a super poor family, if you lost your house in a fire, if you've lost a loved one for XYZ reason, it's very different than if you haven't had that same experience. All right.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So let me read this. Trevor wrote in. This is fantastic. He said, "Love the book. Thanks for bringing it to my attention. You are welcome." Well, I can't remember if it was Kyle or Brianna that suggested it, but one of you two get to take the credit. Kyle, good job. The links between expectations and happiness was so well put. I love the idea that we are terrible about predicting the future and that we will not know the next thing that disrupts the whole world. Ain't that the truth? Right? But it happens every 10 years. We keep making it around, and we keep making it through and adapting somehow. The one thing I took away is the importance of, quote, think time, and how that is something that is needed in a lot of roles today and can be more difficult than just trying to constantly stay busy. Right? I got to figure out when to put that think time in my calendar and just call it that. Think time, put the phone on do not disturb, maybe even go for a walk, right? And turn everything off.
Yeah, that's
I love
good.
that.
Thanks for that comment.
So.
And Kyle, something that you said at the beginning, kind of that pull effect, he said, a mind stretched by new experiences can never go back. So when people have different experiences, they'll talk over you. So Aaron, I love that you can really put on an arm. We should do that more in patient care. We should do that more with our friends. We should do that more with our families. We should do that more with our staff. It comes to asking better questions. I think that's what we've talked a lot about before. And at the end, he says, when you focus on what doesn't change, you stop trying to predict the uncertain events. And that's what our listener just said. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And speaking of listening, Brianna, you gave me this advice, and I used it yesterday.
God, what is it?
No, it was good. I had a staff member say, "Hey, I want to talk to you," and she pulled me aside, and I could tell it was one of those, like, we're going to be here for a minute conversations. And we started getting into it, and I felt myself immediately go to, I'm going to fix this, I'm going to solve this, right? I went in full dude mode, and then I heard Brianna right here, and so I stopped myself, and I said, this is going to sound really weird and awkward, it's going to sound like it's not for me, but is this a do you want me to listen conversation? Is this do you want me to give you some advice conversation? Or is this, do you want me to solve a problem conversation? Because I'm really good at the last one, right? And I'm already going into that, but I'm going to pause and pull back and say, which one do you want? And she goes, wow, I don't know. I said, well, think about it. So she was quiet for probably 10, 20 seconds and said, I think I just want advice. And I said, okay, cool. Then I'm just going to shut up until you've said everything that you think I need to know. I'll ask whatever questions I want, and then I'll leave advice, but I don't want to know what you're going to do with it. And it changed the entire tone of the conversation. And part of that was helping when she was sharing, well, why did it come this way? Why do you think it is? Help me understand what's going on in your head to see where you're coming from and your perspective. So it was really neat going through that. And now I'm afraid that they're going to expect every conversation with me to be really long and drawn out. But it was really helpful advice, but understanding, what we were going into, what the backgrounds were, and, what experience and what everybody wanted. It was kind of neat.
I think how much
You were a
more
super
she
communicator.
took away from that.
Yes. Yeah, I think it was different. It went from being a what I think we both thought might have been a challenging conversation to a very productive and positive and happy one. So.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
So, and if they're listening, I'm not sharing anything. My other teammates are listening. Like, it has nothing to do with you all. Yeah, everything's good.
Good.
So, awesome.
Yeah, I was kind of nervous because when you recommended this book, we were talking about hacks when we read books. So I listen and then I take a notes section. So like I have just like a scroll of notes, right? You can't even see it. But I went to the productivity game. I shared that link with you guys, and he said he totally missed the mark on this book. I don't know if you guys watched it before you read it.
Oh, I did.
Really? I was like, what? That's not at all what it said, because it talked about Houdini, right? He wasn't prepared, and like he died because he got punched in the stomach, but he was prepared and then not prepared. And then he gave like 2 other stories, and I was like, huh. So sometimes these hacks are great. Sometimes, again, the writing, you do have to listen to and read these books. So just the cliff notes, you can get the gist of it, but it's all the little nuances that come up in these books.
Yeah. It's the nuances, and it's the conversation I have with myself in my head.
And giving yourself the time to have the conversation in your head.
Yep. So that's why I like listening when I'm running or when I'm doing something where nothing else can distract me. And the hard part is I don't have my notes when I'm running. So I tried. I get a little sweaty. I'm a sweaty runner. But
yeah, this is one where I felt I was putting the book down and repeating quotes to my wife quite often. And I was thinking too, I was kind of joking in my mind, or I was thinking about you two as I was reading certain parts of it too, of like, there's one chapter about, and a lot of it is a really kind of like finance, about finance, because he's a finance guy. So a lot of it kind of comes back to like the markets and those types of things. But I was wondering, after you read the book, did you consider, or maybe you are, because part of me, as I read the book, I was like, I need to have more like in savings in my practice. Like, I know that there's like the rules of thumb on, hey, you should have like 2 to 3 months operation expenses in your, expense account and maybe some savings. But as I was reading, I was thinking, according to him, I should just like expect the worst. So I don't know, did you ever come to that conclusion in your mind of like, I think I need to save a little bit more in my practice or at home to prepare for the potential? Like, it's okay to be paranoid, essentially, and it's okay to prepare for the worst events, right?
I actually kind of took it the other way, Kyle, because we all lived through COVID, and that's about as bad as it can get. I mean, no income for 3 months, and I kept paying my staff. So I'm like, if I can make it through this, we all have access to lines of credit through our businesses at rates that are okay. We've done well, again, like you're a sure thing. So what I've seen in healthcare, specifically eye care, is recession or not, graduated into 2 of them, right? So there's always a workforce, there's always a grit factor, and that's 99% of it, is we will always figure it out. So I think the uncertainty part again, we all live in uncertainty. But I kind of took it the other way. What about you, Aaron?
Well, I split the difference. Right. Well, when has Aaron Warner been the peacemaker, right? So
write it down, folks.
Yeah. No, I looked and said, to Brianna's point, what's the worst that can happen? Right. What's the absolute worst that can happen? Right. The business goes bankrupt. Something bad happens. Like, we're still alive. I still have my family. I still have my relationships, and I've gone through bad. I've gone through horrible, and so it could always be worse. In fact, I had a conversation with my wife about this. We're coming up on. I have a brother that was or is a year and a half younger than me, but we lost him 21 years ago. And you go through something like that. There's not a whole lot that hits that same level of bad, I mean, they're crappy, but there's not a whole lot that hits that same level of bad. And so putting things in perspective, what's the worst that can happen? And then, but also knowing that I've done a lot of the work before. I've got a savings, right? Is it as much as I want? Well, savings never is as much as you want, but I've got the savings, right? I've got the resources. I have this skill set, and I'm continuing to invest by having book clubs like with you guys, reading other books and doing things so that when bad times come, hopefully I'm not blindsided, but I have a pretty big repertoire that I can pull from to say, hey, how do we figure this out? Right? So I don't feel like I'm just floating along blindly, but I also don't feel like I need to live in panic because one, I think I'm pretty resourceful and I can figure it out, and two, I've done it in the past, and I've proven to myself. So I kind of try to sit in the middle there, which is a weird place for me to be.
I'm going to the blackjack table for that one.
Nice.
Good entrepreneur there.
But I think we can also end this where the book started, where he said, invest in preparedness, not in prediction. Mm-hmm. Risk is what you can't see. And it should not make sense before it happens. What you don't see coming always is.
Yeah. So. I like it. Well, awesome. We, for those who are running on the treadmill listening to this live or in recording, you are welcome. I think you got an extra mile in today. And
Right.
So, Alan, thinking of you specifically, but we really appreciate these. Honestly, I think these are my favorite sessions that we do quarterly. I look forward to it, and I look forward to the conversations that we have for those who don't know. We've got a good group chat going through this leading up to it, talking about our experiences through it, and those of you who are reading it that are my friends, reach out to me as well. I'm sure that Kyle and Brianna, you guys have similar experiences through. But it's the conversation, it's the journey that I love. So thank you guys for being a part of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron.
All right, until next time.